The end of the 2022 season hasn't been really impressive for Perez. As a result of Verstappen's failure to return his position in Brazil, the Mexican driver has struggled greatly with team orders and decisions. Furthermore, Perez believed Verstappen held him back in Abu Dhabi due to his slow pace as the Dutchman exited the pit stop, and Verstappen didn't want to hold back Leclerc so that Perez could catch up to him. When Perez tried to voice his opinion, the team made a decision that is rather controversial, but is a cruel reminder about the reality on the team. Daniel Ricciardo has been signed as a reserve driver with Red Bull, and although many think of this move as a reminder of the good old days, it's far from it. That is why Verstappen has been heavily linked to having a new teammate in 2023, and according to one F1 expert, he has a direct say in this matter. But we'll get to that later in this video. For now, let's dive deeper into Perez's fate with Red Bull and how he has lost his voice in the team he has so greatly aided over the last 2 seasons. It goes without saying that Perez was a crucial factor in the team's success in 2021 and 2022. The team never had a 1-2 finish in the Drivers' Championship, and while they didn't achieve it in 2022, they were so close with Perez. However, the Mexican felt Verstappen slowed him down in Abu Dhabi, resulting in increased tire degradation. That is why Perez lost a lot of speed and had to visit the pit stop a second time, while Leclerc was left out on the front with 1 pit stop behind his name. When Perez tried to catch up to the Monegasque, it wasn't really a smooth ride, as he struggled a lot with the back markers. Eventually, he ran out of laps, and while many thought that Verstappen was supposed to hold up Leclerc intentionally, something that Perez did to Hamilton last year at this same place, it wasn't in the Dutchman's mind. That is quite a tricky call to make. You also don't want to end up... Of course, you can possibly block, but I mean, is that fair racing? I think it's not the nicest way going out of the season like that. It looked like Chico was catching him enough to try and actually get a move, but then he lost quite a bit of time with that bit of a fuss between Pierre and Alex. He lost quite a bit of time with that, because I was watching that on the screens. With Verstappen's relationship with Perez already over, one has to wonder what comes next for the Mexican. Obviously, he is going to have a hard time in accepting the reality, which is that he will never be number 1 in Red Bull, not with the pace he has showcased. But what was even more painful for Perez is that Verstappen took the position from him in Brazil by team orders, and he never gave it back like he was instructed to due to the Monaco qualifying outcome. That is why Verstappen has struggled a lot to prove to the world that his actions were justified, and after the 2021 championship outcome and the budget cap breach, this was just another hit for the reputation of the Austrian team. Still, Verstappen does not want to be challenged for the team's top spot, and according to Damon Hill, he has already requested that Red Bull replace Perez as his teammate and bring in Ricciardo. When talking about this matter, the 1996 F1 champion said, "It could be quite an interesting one if you think about the problems they have apparently had between Max and Sergio. Let's say the toys go out of the pram and there is some sort of fallout there. Daniel Ricciardo could be in prime position. It is his home, and he does owe a lot to Red Bull, so he will be very keen to be back in that fold. What is it about the prodigal son who returns? He could be in a good position coming back and having learned a lot in other places. It can be that you can improve having been somewhere else than returning to the place you started." The last thing that Perez would want is to be without a seat from 2023 onward. Although he has renewed his contract until the 2024 season, it's evident that he doesn't comply with the rules set by Red Bull. And his last competitive race was back in Monaco, more precisely, against Verstappen. Since Monaco, Perez has been unable to compete with Ferrari and Mercedes, let alone his teammate Verstappen. That is why he has the biggest qualifying gap with his teammate Verstappen of an average of 0.5 seconds. In comparison, Russell only has around 0.1 second qualifying advantage over Hamilton. With Ricciardo joining Red Bull as a reserve driver, one can't help but wonder if changes are on the way. Obviously, Perez started to talk too much, according to Peter Windsor, and the latest talking mistake was made in Abu Dhabi. Peter thinks that Perez shouldn't have said anything about Verstappen being too slow, because eventually that's what lighted a switch in the Dutchman, and that's what made him run the extra mile to get away from Perez. Probably a mistake, I think, by Chico to get on the radio on lap 29 and say, "Max is holding me up," which was like a red rag to a bull, because at that moment, of course, Max immediately started to reduce his lap times and the gap between Max and Chico started to increase. When that message gets out, he thinks, "Right, this is starting to get serious now. I'm going to have another issue with Chico." So what is next for Perez? The team is considering its options, and quite frankly, we could see Ricciardo suiting up for Red Bull sooner rather than later. While many think that this move was done out of pity and for the sake of the old glory days, this is far from the truth. Ricciardo knows how to drive the Red Bull car, and if the team was to replace Perez, then Ricciardo would be the perfect candidate. Given where his career currently stands, Ricciardo wouldn't have any problems being the perfect wingman for Verstappen and occasionally winning a race or two. This is something that, aside from Damon Hill, Ralf Schumacher believes too. According to the ex-F1 driver, we could see Ricciardo suiting up with Verstappen sooner rather than later. When talking about this matter, Ralf said, "Not 100% sure that Perez will still be the teammate next year. I think Ricciardo has a good chance. Behind the scenes, it must be very, very aggressive, and I think Max wants a new combination. Max is now the spearhead of Red Bull. The whole future is set up for him until 2028. At the end of the day, he pulls the coals out of the fire, brings home the victories." Accordingly, I could imagine his contract also gives him the opportunity to have a say in who drives next to him. And I think he prefers Ricciardo. Aside from Ralf Schumacher, another driver believes Perez will not be Verstappen's teammate in 2023. Former F1 driver David Coulthard, on the other hand, takes a different approach to the situation, believing that no one but Perez is to blame for the current situation. When talking about Verstappen's actions towards Perez and whether they are justified or not, Coulthard added, "It was an open conversation and there's nothing to be interpreted. The team made a request and the driver denied it. The answer was there before, and someone has been knocking again to try to get a different answer. Being consistent in your behavior patterns is a quality. Inconsistency is what you need to watch out for because you don't know what you're dealing with." Chico was out of Formula One with no knocking on his door. Red Bull gave him the opportunity to come back and a car that's nailed on to win races. He's had a fair crack of the whip to try and beat Max, and he has consistently not delivered on the same level. He has occasionally done so, and I admire the victories he has had. With that being said, it's obvious that Perez is going to have a hard time obtaining his seat in Red Bull. If he does so, he would have to accept that he is number 2 and number 2 only, and there is no way that the team will jeopardize Verstappen's position just to help Perez in any way whatsoever. What do you think will happen next with Perez and Red Bull? Let us know in the comments below.